We had a deal like 4 years ago, and Victor and I were talking about doing this this partnership between the Television Academy, Interactive Media Peer Group, and the Academy, and we'd been doing them for like 3 years. And Victor said, well, what do you want to do next? And I said, well, let's put it at night after the reception with a bar, because then everybody that we like will come. And he's still honoring it, so give him a hand. There's a bar. I think there was a bar here. So welcome to another conversation about VR at Digital Hollywood. This one will focus more specifically on television. I'm Seth Shapiro. I'm a governor of interactive media at the Television Academy. My co-governor actually just walked in. Stand up, Mark. Give yourself a hand. Give Mark a hand. So the relevant information about that, in all seriousness, is about 2 years ago, we went to the board of the Television Academy, which is the home of the Emmys, and made our argument why VR was the next generation of television, and that the Emmys ought to acknowledge it. And we have now had 2 Emmy winners in VR, and we expect to have a lot more. So we're very pleased to partner with Victor on this panel. I'm kind of sick of hearing myself talk, but fortunately we have a big panel. So we have 6 amazing projects. Now, the thing about talking about VR is it's sort of like dancing about architecture, and that's a little bit difficult in panels for people who haven't seen stuff. So obviously it's hard to have a lot of displays and devices here, so we're going to show you the flatties of the projects and have each of these experts who created these amazing projects talk about how they moved those into VR. And why don't we start with each of you introducing yourselves, why don't you each introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your project, and then I'll show the clips.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Elijah Allen Blitz. I'm a virtual reality director. The most recent project I did was with Time Magazine for the most recent Ken Burns film called Defying the Nazis. And we recreated one of the boat ride where this couple saved 27 Jewish children. And you're going to see it on the clip. What's going to happen? You're going to see it on the flatty. I produced it with VR Playhouse. It was Christina and Ian, or Christina's right there. Ian's somewhere in the room. And yeah.
And you two guys, by the way, just did an amazing case study in this, which I was at. So hopefully we'll talk about that. So they're both from that. And then Project Empathy.
My name is Lori Kozlowski. I'm the producer of Project Empathy, which is a VR series of 4 VR shorts that examines mass incarceration in the United States. It was co-founded by Van Jones, CNN commentator, and Jamie Wong, who wanted to combine high technology and the best new medium in storytelling with one of the biggest social justice issues in the United States. And so we've chosen some of the most outstanding directors we could find in Hollywood to attack the US prison system from 4 different angles. Wow.
Hello, I'm Dave Alpert, CEO of Skybound, and I produced a scripted VR series called Gone that we did for Samsung with Weaver. It was written and directed by J.T. Petty, the creator of Splinter Cell, the video game, and it's sort of the first scripted series to sort of really explore a long-form narrative in VR.
And it was an Emmy nominee this year, actually.
Are we allowed to say that? Can I say that?
No. Actually, you're not, and I shouldn't have said it either. But.
Thank you.
I'm Jen Dennis with the RSA Films. I produced and worked on, with that man over there, Mr. Shulowitz, the Martian VR experience. And I didn't save any lives like Van Johnson's piece. But we had a great time, yeah.
Hi, my name's Aruna Inverson. I'm a creative director and visual effects supervisor at Digital Domain. We recently completed a live action and real-time project for a sci-fi activation at Comic-Con this year, incorporating Dennis Haysbert shot and pre-rendered and placed into a real-time VR environment and played back in real time while he is pre-recorded. So.
Wow, that's interesting.
Wow.
I'm Christina Heller. I'm the CEO and co-founder of VR Playhouse. I co-founded it with that guy over there, Ian Forrester. And we're a creative studio and production company that specialize in VR, AR, and we'll call it emerging creative tech. And we did Defying the Nazis with the fabulous Elijah Allen Blitz.
And you're having a big party tomorrow, aren't you? I'm sorry.
We're having a big party tomorrow night.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Hi, I am not Ben Arfman. My name is Stefan Grambart, and I am the creative director at Secret Location. Ben is a good friend of mine and is the director of a hybrid virtual reality broadcast series we put out with Sci-Fi International just recently into foreign markets. It's called Halcyon, and yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing. So these are all great. So I think you're here, so why don't we start with defying the Nazis? These are all about 2 minutes each. So you maybe bring the house lights down, we'll roll them, and then we'll talk about them in order, and then we'll open it up to questions. I think that's probably a good format. Okay, here we go.
February 23rd, 1946. My darling Martha, I hope and assume this reaches you on your return from what must have been a very exacting but very successful expedition. I must say that I would like to begin having a home again. The kids don't show their feelings too much. I see nothing but men's things in my wardrobe. I smell no perfumes. I have been quite desperate at times. I want to go on for what there is left of life with you. 7 years ago tonight, we stepped off the train into Wilson Station.
So first of all, it's Ken Burns, and second of all, it's the most dramatic topic that you could possibly pick. How did this project come about? And then also, while you're talking, I will try and see if I can get enough bandwidth to show another clip that you say that's online that's very moving, but why don't you guys take it while I do that?
You want us to talk about that?
We'll talk about how the project came about.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was the trailer for the actual PBS piece, right? That wasn't the VR thing. So we created, it's a really, I mean, that film is incredible. I really recommend just seeing that, the 2D version in itself. But what ends up happening in the film is there's a part in it where they save these 27 children, and they smuggle these Jewish children on a boat in Portugal and get them to the United States. And we recreated that boat ride in CGI. And so you're on the boat with them. It's a absolute exact replication of the boat, and you're on it, and you see the sky kind of going overhead, and you see the survivors' voices, and you hear their real voices, and you see their pictures in the clouds, and they're telling you the story about, you know, what it was like to be on the boat. And then you see, you know, Statue of Liberty on the horizon as the sun comes up, and you go through this experience with them. And that's the VR experience that we created, and we, you know, did that with Ken and then Time Magazine ended up getting involved because this became their flagship piece for their launch of their Life VR app.
So the actual VR experience plays a little bit more like a memory of that event than an actual photorealistic experience of being on the boat in the 1940s. So, you know, I think it worked with the fact that we were using audio that were accounts from the actual survivors recalling their experience. The fact that it was CG, it's like a little dreamlike and a little bit nostalgic in a way. And the project came about because I gave a couple of campers who showed up on a boat to the Channel Islands.
I love my mom. My mom. I love my kids.
Damn
And
pre-roll ads.
they didn't have a place to stay. We gave them a campsite, and a year and a half later, Elijah came to VR Playhouse with this idea. So
it's true.
The moral of the story is random acts of kindness can sometimes have long-term benefits. And it was a real pleasure to work on this piece and a real honor.
Totally honored as well. And one of the things we just pulled up, I thought this would be a better representation of it, is we have a video that's on Time's website of us showing one of the survivors on that boat ride, her rescue in VR.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be a little more
So yeah,
appropriate.
she's watching the piece, and that was sort of an interesting experience to get to show this piece we had created.
Have you ever heard of virtual reality?
I don't quite understand it.
Yeah, you should always show that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know why we were showing the PBS thing, but
How did the relationship with Ken come about? Did he find you? Did you? I mean, you may have said this. I apologize, but how did? I know you said it. But how did?
Elijah should field this one.
I for about 20 years. Actually, the Sharps who did the rescue are his grandparents. Wow. And so, Artemis co-directed this with Ken, which is the first time Ken's ever co-directed anything. And so I'd been pitching him on doing a VR piece for it because I thought it was so perfect for about a year. And finally, we got like this kind of nudge from PBS, and they went, "All right, okay, we're open to it. Let's begin discussions." And we, went to VR Playhouse, and it just ended up happening perfectly. But we didn't get the green light from Ken until we'd already had something to show him. So we had to create the whole thing basically on spec. And we go in there, and Ken puts on the goggles, and we're waiting. Everyone's kind of like, because if he says no, the project's done, and he just goes, "Perfect." And we're like, all right, we're good.
Wow.
We're good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll come back, but that was amazing. Thank you. Let's go to Project Empathy. Do you want me to show it, or do you want to talk first?
Yeah,
or?
I'll just say a brief thing about what you're going to see. This is actually a linear companion piece because as we were explaining to people what it was, we found that we needed, a YouTube trailer that would explain to people how we intended and the approach we wanted to take toward former and current inmates within the U.S. prison system. So what you're seeing is our trailer on YouTube. So that's an introduction video we made to what was called Day of Empathy. Originally, that was the name of the project, but then we found this would not be solved on just one day where we get political. This is definitely something long-term. There are 4 VR shorts that go with this project. However, we found even if we made 15 or 20, it's difficult to wrap your arms all the way around all the issues with the U.S. prison system. It was concepted of Van Jones, who has an organization called Dream Corps and Cut 50, with their eyes on ending mass incarceration in the U.S. So there's a political component toward this about getting VR in front of policymakers and politicians that can actually change policy. And in fact, we've screened the first 2 pieces for Cory Booker and Newt Gingrich and others within Washington, D.C. already. We premiered the first VR short at the Democratic National Convention, and we premiered the second one with The Atlantic at their Race and Justice Summit. And what I found so far is just the general public probably knows a lot less about what goes on in prisons and the U.S. prison system than you might think. I am the producer of the project. I did the majority of the research, so most of my year has been spent in interviewing people who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, and I've just been very humbled by their stories. I first met Johnny and Juan, who you saw on the screen. Each of them one spent 25 years in prison, and the other one spent 13 years in prison, and their stories are pretty incredible. I mean, if you asked me a year ago if I'd be dialoguing with someone who has a felony of that degree, I would say no, but your eyes are open to the kinds of people that we're sending into these institutions and kind of what happens there. So in terms of digging deeper and having our directors go deeper into it, we definitely hit some roadblocks, as all journalists do in trying to report on prisons and what happens there. They don't let you in. And so a lot of our pieces are scripted. They're based on true stories, but we weren't able to actually get into a prison. I did attempt that to get into Sing Sing and Rikers, but they didn't let me go there. So we are working on the last 2 pieces of the last 2 shorts. But yeah, we're just excited to bring a technology like this, a medium like this, to an issue that just has so many different problems, and very humbled to be able to pull this off. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, we haven't met before, but we're all, obviously the famous line is that VR is an empathy machine.
Right.
You made a decision to produce in VR,
Yep.
assuming, and for those of us who know somebody who's ever been incarcerated, it's night and day from somebody who hasn't, because somebody who doesn't know anyone who's in prison assumes that the bad people are locked away, and then you
Right.
realize what an astonishing percent of the U.S. population is locked up for all sorts of different stuff. So what was the process that led you to VR for this?
I think the original concept with Jamie and Van was that they wanted to use the most advanced technology or medium possible to attack this issue. And at the time, that's kind of VR at the moment, where we are with storytelling. We also had awesome directors like Nani de la Pena, who's considered the godmother of VR.
godmother, yeah.
She is one of our directors. Wendy Calhoun directed the second piece, which is called Left Behind. Wendy is a co-executive producer of Empire, and Left Behind is about the children who see their parents arrested and then become incarcerated. So you actually are in a VR experience as a 9-year-old little girl. So we shot that this summer in North Hollywood. And then the other 2 pieces, one is called Prey, what happens to adolescents who end up in adult prisons. That's actually legal in the state of New York and Michigan, where through a loophole, or actually in those states it doesn't really matter, you can be tried as a 15 or 16-year-old and end up at Rikers or Sing Sing. And that's, I can just tell you without saying too much, incredibly, incredibly dangerous. And then the last film is about the school-to-prison pipeline, and it's about how over-policed our schools have become. And for small infractions that you probably should go to detention for at most high schools, you can actually end up with assault charges and end up being kicked out of school and kind of into this pipeline that leads to a road of possible incarceration. So we really dug deep. These directors, some had never done VR before, really attacked it from different perspectives, and some using animation, some using participatory elements of VR, but we let each of them take their own path, and it's been really rewarding.
Wow, it's wonderful work. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
coming. Sorry you have to go after that.
I'm really
but Gone is awesome.
Thank you for being the first entertainment piece. Appreciate it.
Well, it's dark. There's a little edge to it.
It's dark, very dark. You're welcome. You're welcome.
So I'll preface it. I'll make it easier. So the thing that one of the things that we really haven't seen in VR that many of us who love it are waiting for is episodic content, right? Mm-hmm. That's been the business model that the great era of the serialized television drama, both over the top and from traditional networks and from cable networks, has been the engine of the culture, right, for the last 10, 15 years. And so you and you are awesomely people who are actually starting to move into that. So tell us about Gone.
Well, so Gone, I come from a software background, and one of the things we always said is, that's not a bug, it's a feature. And so I try to apply that when I went to see the first demo of the Samsung Gear. It was very, very early days. They brought in the box, and there was like 3 engineers accompanying it, and they gave me the demo, and I apparently at the time I think it was like 5 to 7% of people would get nauseous while watching it, and I came out and I was quite nauseous, and they were like, no, we're sorry, we're working on that, like don't worry, the next generation, by the time we go commercial, that'll be gone. And I was like, no, that's actually great. Like I produced The Walking Dead, and we work really hard to make people nauseous, so to be able to get that off the bat was actually a great thing for us. And I say that like half joking, but being able to make people feel something, the empathy engine works one way, but to actually make people uncomfortable is something that we were really excited about. So, as a new parent, we talk about this when you go to like a park with your kids, and like you're sort of in the park watching kids, like everybody's kind of talking, hanging out, all kind of collectively watching your kid. And there's a moment where your kid like goes behind a slide, and everyone stops for a second, and then you see the kid come out and everything's okay. But if we were like, what if we can put somebody in that position, right? But the kid doesn't come out. So the idea is you take a viewer off the couch and you make them in some way feel responsible for the disappearance of a child. So that was really sort of the thing that was exciting for us, was like, how do we embrace the agency of VR? How do we get people to sort of feel that they're not just watching this, but they bear a responsibility, not just for her having gone, but also for having to find her. And that was really sort of the genesis of and that was the genesis of the idea.
Awesome. And I saw that and I felt all that and I hated it. And was it you? Somebody talked, we're all friends. We had a 45-minute, we had a long conversation about the fact that it was clearly intentional, that you'd created that you'd specifically, well, I'll shut up and show it. So everybody correct me if I'm wrong, everybody gets the high concept. You're a parent,
Yep.
and your child is at the playground, and you turn around, and they're gone. And that's a tough one.
Well, yes. Some of the things that we were looking for, the thing that was sort of exciting for us was what's different about the medium. We decided not to go full CG, right? So we went 360 video, and we thought that the reason for that was trying to really make it as lifelike as possible, to make you specifically as uncomfortable as possible.
It worked.
Good. The other thing was, because it's not fully immersive, we had to sort of be very careful and thoughtful about how we sort of laid out clues. And the idea is that there's actually video hotspots that you can choose as you go along. So one of the biggest thing was, we're used to directing an audience to look in this direction, right? The story's happening here. So we're like, what happens if the audience is looking the wrong way? And so we said, well, what if that's a feature, not a bug? So we said, let's hide information, let's hide clues like in a mystery all along the periphery. And then the other thing is they only appear at certain times, so that if you can't actually get all the clues in one viewing, right? So the same way that if you're at a party and if you're having, which I'm very excited for your party tomorrow. If we're having a conversation here, I'm not hearing what's going on over there. So the idea that these things are progressing in real time was actually a very interesting idea, so that you have to choose where to pay your attention. And maybe it's an actual clue, maybe it's a red herring, or maybe it's just nothing. So we really try to lay in as many clues as possible to give you a sense of of agency, even though it's actually linear video.
Were there, it's fascinating, were there film predicates? I kept thinking about Hitchcock when I watched it, but that just might be me. Did you actually, it feels like this in a certain way takes the tools of agency in VR and builds on what worked before, and the fact that you were on, I remember thinking, oh, he works on Walking Dead, that makes perfect sense. Do you think, well, now I get to do this, or talk a little bit more about that process, sort of from where what you do in your sort of day job to the tools that you got here that you didn't have in TV?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the base level of just actually showing up to set for the first time was completely different, right? Because we were doing this really early in the process. I mean, we shot this, I think, about a year and a half ago at this point, right? So we were doing stuff that everything was really experimental and early. So there was no monitors, right? So you couldn't actually see anything that you were shooting. You would have to wait an hour for a quick stitch to sort of come up, right? So the idea is we would try to mock it out with a real camera and then guess that we got it. So we would just run it a bunch of times and hope that we would get it. But usually by the time that we would see that we'd gotten it, would had to have moved on. The other aspect is we didn't have any, so just that idea of showing up, we shot the first week in the Sequoia National Forest, which was amazing and beautiful, but you get there's no edge of frame, right? So there is nowhere to hide. So there's this great moment for us where we all sort of, we would basically, they came up with a very technical term called hidey holes, and everybody would have to find an appropriate hidey hole. And then we would basically, the director needed to see the actors, so we often would bury the director in the ground and run track over the director, which as a producer, my favorite thing in the world is burying the director, right? So I actually got to live out my dream. You're welcome. So we were able to do that, but honestly, having that sort of film school mentality of okay, I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and everything that I've learned I'm basically throwing out the window and sort of starting again was both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you. That was great. So how many of you have seen The Martian in one form or another? Good. It's astonishing. Jen, you want to talk about the process? Ted was here. Well, I think we did the same thing, but he was sitting there 6 months ago. But it'll be great to hear your version.
Thanks, Ted, for breaking the ground for me. Obviously, you all probably have seen the Martian and know a little bit about it. And I'm lucky enough to work for RSA Films, which and Ridley Scott. And when we were talking about doing the advertising for this, Ridley's very involved in creating a narrative behind his films. He doesn't just release them with trailers or whatever. If anybody here remembers Prometheus, he released the 2025 TED Talk, which got a lot of eyes on it, and he's very actively involved in how his movies are released and marketed. And when The Martian was first, I was working at RSA, it first came up on the docket, I took one look at that and said, oh my God, that needs a VR piece. And luckily enough, the crazy people at Fox were already thinking that gentleman there and his friends. And through a bunch of hoops and fiery rings, we ended up in the same foxhole creating this experience, which we didn't save any lives. Nobody was incarcerated. But I will say, in terms of like moving the needle in the direction, which, this conference, I love the empathy, but we're still talking about the tech here. And luckily, this was a great platform to try and be experimental. And what started out as a pitch for an 8-minute experience turned into a 30-minute you get saved from Mars. So great, you saved some people, but we saved somebody from Mars. So I'm going to preface the 2-minute piece here that, our Flatty is more of a promotional piece that was used a lot more for award show stuff. So it feels a little silly, and I'm sorry about that. But at least you can see a little bit about it. So.
Entertain yourselves. Talk amongst yourselves.
Jen's actually going to recreate the trailer using sock puppets.
I don't suppose. Let's see.
I just like to take the torch now and just clear everything off.
It's 1 second. One of these has to open.
It's kind of fun. Destruction.
Don't you hate that? No, neither of them.
We can move on and then come back.
Yeah, we might have to come back to it. I'm sorry. I do have it somewhere, but we'll have to come back to it. Sorry. Do you want to? That's a fine introduction.
All right.
Isn't it?
I think you should probably play what we have for Incorporated just to give a taste
Yes,
of
let's
what's
do
coming.
this. We'll do that first.
Oh, not this one. The
See, you guys are killing me.
We like your desktop, though. So.
Thank you. That's very. I'll happily sell it to you. Incorporate. So that's not the right one. All right. Got through this one.
This
Anyway.
is this one. Yep. The project was commissioned by Sci-Fi, and they approached us to do a real-time cinematic piece with positional tracking inside the Vive for Comic-Con, for San Diego Comic-Con. And so we developed a technique to allow shooting Dennis Haysbert on a green screen stage and placing him in a real-time environment in that room. And so you as a viewer are in that chair, and the hood gets pulled off of you, and he approaches you and tells you that your contract is terminated, which can only mean one thing. So, in the piece, we shot Dennis Haysbert and an extra character with the drill, and he comes around and he walks around you, so you can follow Dennis Haysbert fully as he is in 360 space, as well as the secondary character who comes around as well and ends your contract, and it goes into the tagline. So it's about a 3-minute piece at Comic-Con, and there's going to be the pre-rendered version on YouTube very soon for the premiere. So.
Excellent. And is it a one-off, or is this going to continue with the?
The show is a series, but this was just an activation for Comic-Con. Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of technical things we did for this one, shooting stereo pairs of cameras, using laser scanning of the room. You can actually see your body, and the body animates to you as you're moving around, even though you're bound in the activation. So it's a lot of little different things to hit to create kind of more cinematic experience with positional tracking in VR. So.
And how long is it? How long is the piece?
The piece is 3 minutes, and it comes in, it pulls the hood gets pulled off, and it just happens. He just talks to you in a monologue voice like he does, and almost wants to sell you car insurance, but ends up ending your contract. So it's pretty cool, and I think it's something that hasn't yet been done with a pre-rendered live-action production into a real-time environment and playing back in real time. So,
awesome. That's great.
That's
Thank
pretty
you.
cool.
So you actually have some commonalities, but let's do you want to talk about yours first, and then
Sure.
and then
Yeah.
and then we'll come back. Yeah.
I'll talk first, and then I guess we can show the little clip,
Yep.
which is going to be a little piece that we did for promotion. So Halcyon, like I stated before, it's hybrid, it's short form. So it was designed initially to sort of fill the foreign markets where they sometimes have these little gaps of content because they have different regulations or different ways that they show commercials. So there's often like 5 to 7 minutes of content that needs to get filled every couple of hours. So Sci-Fi International came to us and said, we want to do something with you. We want to do something that's digital first. And we think this might be a really good opportunity to try something. So we pitched a few ideas, and this idea that I came up with for the first crime scene, or the first crime in VR, the first murder in VR, which would allow you to then explore a crime scene in real-time 3D, but also have these connected linear, like traditional episodes in short form. So that sort of gets bundled together, and it's about an hour of content in total. And yeah, what we ended up doing was we split out. We did traditional on one side, and then we did full CG on the other.
And I'm just going to throw this in because I think it actually makes the clip even more interesting. Is you addressed actually a really smart business situation, which is the fact that we've got this massive spot load in American television, and internationally they don't necessarily. So just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So again, because of how the commercials are broken up, we ended up being able to put our like short form content episodes into the markets in South America, in the Middle East, Australia, Asia, and Europe. So it's everywhere but North America right now, but we're working on distribution here as well.
While I'm going to find your Martian clip, but in the meantime, why don't if any of the three of you can talk about sort of the nature of dealing with VR in the constraints of episodic TV production, which so far we've seen a lot of theatrical, we've seen a lot of original IP, but TV obviously has a kind of a storied history and sort of derivative online narrative series and other things that have tried to ride the length. There haven't been. I mean, we look at this a lot. There, the idea of building a VR story around an existing television IP is really interesting. So for any of you who've done it, it would be great to sort of talk about the realities dealing with the production team, et cetera, getting approvals, all that.
Yeah, sure. I could start. We really early on realized that we needed to sort of pull back from the very conceptual stuff and the very sort of prototype nature of VR. We were really pushing things forward ever since we worked on the Sleepy Hollow project for Fox Television. We had basically become completely immersed in VR ourselves, and we're working in it day in, day out. And when we got to the point where we said we're going to do this short form episodic thing, we realized very quickly that there was no real pipeline for this yet. And finding a crew to be able to film what we needed them to film, and find the developers to be able to build what we needed them to build in the time and budget that we had was going to be impossible. And more than that, the audience was going to be completely overwhelmed with things that were new. Right. One of the reasons we chose a police procedural was because it was something that would be very familiar to them, and is not using the word formulaic in a bad sense, but in the sense that you kind of understand what happens next. The accoutrements of that genre. There's a suspect, there's a victim, there's detectives, there's clues, which makes it very easy for an audience member to say, oh, this is what Law & Order looks like in VR, I get it.
And you actually won. You said the first time that we gave in VR was actually for Sleepy Hollow Experience, which you guys did, and that was an interesting conversation because you guys did it at Comic-Con. The lines were really long, as the lines were for you guys for The Martian. I think, what did you say at Sundance? It was like 3 or 4 hours, and for you guys at Comic-Con, I mean, so there's something to be said for taking those first arrows in the back, but. Now there's a distribution pipeline coming. What was it? So what was the Sci-Fi? Actually, it makes sense that Sci-Fi as the brand is in here. But what's it like working with a network to the extent that any of you are willing to talk about it?
I think we were able to help drive their vision in VR. Since it's so new, they are learning just as we are, and we just have a little bit more technical expertise in trying to figure out how we shoot things. And so to shoot stuff for the Incorporated piece, it was very much a visual effects driven shoot. We shot Dennis on green screen with single cameras, two cameras, and to be able to pull that into our VFX pipeline and create a 360 experience was a challenge. But we were able to leverage the tool sets that we had built in the past to kind of pull that in. And Sci-Fi was amazed that we were able to kind of create something in that vein. Because originally they just wanted, let's just put a 360 camera down and shoot something in the room. But if you're going to present something in a Vive or in a Rift, you want extra motion. And so we were able to give that to them, and I think they were pretty happy with that. And given our past relationships with them, hopefully it'll continue. So we'll see where it goes from there. But,
our experience with Sci-Fi International, they were an amazing partner to have. They were really into it. We forewarned them that we were experimenting here a lot, and that things may not turn out exactly how we want them to, and that we would always pivot. And that's what we've always done at Secret Location is hit those barricades and then either find a way around them or find a way to incorporate them.
Yeah. Awesome. Did you guys have direct experience with PBS in the process, or was it really just sort of Ken, or did you have to deal with the network as well? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we had to deal with Ken, PBS, and Time Magazine.
A lot of stakeholders. We talked about this a bit on the panel. Yeah. Actually, one of the things that we had to be was very protective of the piece and who saw the piece, because we were executing in a short time frame and we were doing CG. And so if a lot of the stakeholders started coming in with notes, and if they felt very strongly about those notes, it wasn't going to be an impossibility to be able to enact them. So, we were very protective and made sure that only the true, real stakeholders saw the rough cuts. But it was a lot. There were a lot of phone calls, and really, I think what made us be able to pull together all of these different mega organizations and get them all looking in the same direction was just the opportunity of cross-promotion here between Time Inc. and PBS. Basically, PBS being able to put eyeballs onto the Time Life VR app, and then Time Inc. to direct viewership to Defying the Nazis. The documentary was such an amazing opportunity that they're like, all right, kids, make your weird VR piece. And I think everyone was happy with the final piece when it came out. But ideally, we were saying, in an ideal scenario, we would have had more time and we could have incorporated more of the voices.
Well, I just want to inject, also not just happy with it. We just found out that the PBS film got 1.4 billion media impressions, and 40% was from the VR experience and the time thing. Yeah. Wow. So that's So they're happy with it.
Yeah. And viewership for the documentary was much higher than they expected too, and that was definitely because of the VR experience and the Time Life VR app. So all good. If people are learning about history and untold American hero stories, I think that's a win.
Do you have any sense of how they discovered the VR piece? Was it Time specifically, or was it through a storefront, or?
Well, the Time obviously did a lot of marketing in their, I would say, media channel network, and then the Amelie piece. I mean, again, that was Elijah. Elijah had a really, really pure vision when he came to VR Playhouse for this VR piece. He really wanted to recreate the boat ride. And he's like, and we're gonna show it to the survivor. And anytime we deterred even a little bit from that, he was just like, no, this is the vision. And then it very much came to life just how he imagined. So that Amelie piece was also part of the Time rollout, and having a flatty to go with your VR experience is very important so that people can access it easily in their preferred social media networks and things like that.
Yeah. Awesome. So speaking of that, I owe you your flatty. I'm sorry, Jen. So let me roll this.
Where's my flatty?
Where's my flatty?
Where's my flatty?
No one questions.
It really is extraordinary. So what was the process like for developing it? I know that it was a race against time, but you went through a lot of stuff. But
I gotta say, and Ted and I have done a talk together before, and it was really great. I mean, as much as Fox was so into it, and they gave us such free range, and it was about they were adding, usually in a process like this, you're like, can we do this? And they're like, no. They're like, can we do this? And we're like, all right. I mean, there was such great collaboration. There was such great communication. And we say this all the time, and we said it while we were doing it. It was like building an airplane while you were flying. We had no safety rails. We had no idea whether things would work. And it was just a lot of leaps of faith. And, we're a little bit like, I'm sure, a lot of these experiences, we created this a year ago now. And so a little bit of hindsight has to be taken here, and that, none of that had even been close to being done. And I give a lot of like props to Fox and Ridley and all those people who just like embrace this and this new technology. And we went for broke, obviously, and to come up with a 25 to 30 minute experience was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I have a question for that, for you or for Ted, and we'll throw it open to the audience. But one of the things that really hit me, and Ted was nice and showed it to me in the lab with the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the two projects that really hit me with this were yours, and Alumet, but psychological time as opposed to chronological time. Television, in my experience, more or less on the part of the audience, is chronological time-ish. Like if you show people an amazing 48-minute piece of television, they know it's about 48 minutes. And if you show them a 57-minute piece, they'll say that feels a little long. When you took me out of The Martian and you had asked me how long I had been there, and granted I threw more potatoes than most people, I don't know that I could have told you. Did you have any awareness of that going? I mean, you sort of are creators of that because you're the first people to do it. Did you have a sense of that, or did you discover it at the other end?
So much of our building experience, and Ted would say this as well, like we were looking at chunks. You never really got to do the whole thing until very close to the end. So we would go in, twice weekly meetings to see pieces. Like it would be the rover, it would be the potatoes, whatever. But you never actually got to do the linear piece until very close to CES. And I think that we all were just so grateful that we actually made it, that nobody even thought about that until afterwards. And then once we started showing the whole piece to people, that phenomenon came up for sure. People would say, how long do you think you were in there? And people would say, I don't know, 15 minutes. It'd be like, yeah, you were in there for 30. Or people would say, I was in there for an hour. And you'd be like, no, you were in there for, 26 or whatever. Like everybody sort of lost track of time. It was very interesting.
Anybody else have their experience in their projects at all? Just out of curiosity.
Do we know what time it was in their experience?
I mean, with Gone, that just completely ripped me out of time which was your intent. It was so, the reverse of the empathy, but the horror of that moment. So I don't know how long that piece was, but you're a traditional TV guy. Do you have any sense of time and that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, the big challenge for us was, being up early, we were basically told, there was this fear that getting people to put on goggles was hard, right? So you had to get people to say, okay, it's only going to be 6 minutes, 7 minutes. So that was the sell to get people in. So that was a constraint to work from, and it was like, okay, how are we going to tell how do you tell a long form story in 5-minute chunks, right? I hate commercials to begin with, so it's like and commercial breaks and working to that feels very unnatural. So we're saying, okay, we'll start at 5 minutes, but what we guessed was that once people experienced the first episode, that they'd be more willing to experience the second episode at a higher length, right? So we were able to go from a 5 or 6 minute first episode up to 10 or 11 or 12 minutes, and we actually were able to do it because we delivered sequentially. So we actually got permission from Samsung to increase our running time on an episode basis by basically being like, look, if people are going to come back for episode 2, they know what they're getting into. And what we found was that people once you got past that, that thing of putting on the goggles, people were willing to binge, right? They were willing to spend hours. I'm sure you guys see this too, right?
Yeah.
Once you get them in, you're like, just try 5 minutes, be fine. Then they don't want to give it back to you the rest of the day. And that's sort of what we found.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
This is a rumor, and I would love to hear if this is true or not. But I love this story, and so I've told it a few times. But so Samsung was commissioning a lot of content from a lot of different players and spending a lot of money on celebrity experiences, things that were very inspired by the old mediums. And then there was Gone, which didn't have any celebrities attached and wasn't by some big name director, but was what I would consider a VR native experience. It was very much conceived with the medium in mind. And they were surprised when out of nowhere, Gone was one of the most popular pieces on Milk VR. And I'm not surprised by that because it's actually utilizing the method of consuming it to its full extent. But I think some people were surprised that something with a big celebrity wasn't doing as well as this indie kind of project. Is that true?
First of all, thank you.
Yeah.
It's totally true. We had Getting metrics was also hard, just as an aside. But one of the things that we found was that we were 30 times as sticky as the next piece of content. And so what I mean by that was that if you watch like one episode of the LeBron thing, you were 30 times more, and one episode of Gone, you were 30 times more likely to watch episode 2 of Gone than LeBron. And I'm not saying that just because they rhyme, but they.
No, LeBron was the example I was going to use too, but then I thought maybe it wasn't nice to name drop the thing that didn't do as well as your piece.
Well, I mean, I thought the LeBron thing was interesting, but it's funny that you mentioned this, because what we always said was, like, if you look at the early days of TV, it was basically they were put radio on. They would basically do a radio show, but just film it. And I felt like a lot of people were doing that in VR. They were just taking a TV show and just like, oh, we'll just film it and you can look around, and isn't that cool?
The SNL thing.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, 3D movies always leave me a little bit cold because I'm sort of like, it's a gimmick as opposed to a thing. So we were really trying to figure out ways to sort of, how do you make it, like I don't think we got to what the native form is, but I feel like, I don't know, I'd love to hear what you guys think about, like, what is the native form of VR? Because I feel like someone will figure that out and will have the biggest success ever.
Well, I think everybody's fishing in that pool right now.
Yep.
Everybody that is making content out there, besides sort of promotional or advertising, are looking deeply into episodic because they realize that we're teaching a behavior, and then we have to bring people. And that's what Gone did. Was the first piece of content in VR that you would want to watch the next and the next and the next, and that's the behavior that we all works for the recipe. So we need that mentality.
Yeah, well done. And it definitely, for me, in retrospect, it had that kind of shock of the new thing where it felt like you obviously were craftsmen and you knew the medium, but you did this thing that nobody else did. What a horrible topic to pick, right? But I mean, that's the point. It was, horrible. Yeah. But now, so you're doing 3 to 5 minute pieces or 5 to 7 minute pieces each
Yeah,
time? So talk about that, because we don't talk about, obviously in TV especially, that's like, you're shooting at 22 or whatever, but you guys are sort of doing that?
Well, because we didn't have any time frame that we needed to stick to, right? Other than the fact that they wanted to sort of pair them together for these little like content pieces on broadcast, right? So we literally just let the story dictate how long the piece was going to be. Does this need to be long, or can we make it 3 minutes? Are we getting the idea across? And then also, because for us the premium experience is to watch the linear episodes and the VR content in your headset. So you seamlessly transition from a linear episode that you're watching in this sort of like theater, which then because the room that you're in is the crime scene, it sort of breaks apart, which you saw in that video, and now you're all of a sudden free to walk around and continue investigating. And our two protagonists are detectives, and when they go into the crime scene, that's how the episode ends, and that's how you end up then going into VR yourself. So again, because of that, we said, well, we can't just systematically come up with a reason every 7 minutes for them to have to go to the crime scene. So what we did was we just said wherever it falls naturally is where we're going to put it.
Awesome. I have one last question. What's the volume of questions like out there? How many kind of questions we have? Okay, good. There'll wind up being more. I have one. This sounds really stupid, but it's the one that's been occurring to me the most in the last couple weeks, which is that, and I imagine other people have felt some version of this, but I do feel like when I see, and especially if you go someplace and you watch a bunch of different experiences, I feel like the next day my brain has an issue remembering that didn't really happen to me. And I don't have that with television. And I don't have that with movies. And I have this discussion with my unconscious where I say, no, that's not a memory. That was a thing that you watched. And I'm old, so I'm having that conversation. But if I grew up with it, maybe I would. So I just wanted to, in the sense in which VR is revolutionary from that perspective, or from a cognitive perspective, or a psychological or spiritual perspective, I mean, you do feel like this stuff really gets inside of us when it's good. I just wanted, if you guys had any thoughts about that.
I actually do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we actually really questioned the ethics around VR as we were making this content, because it is about the prison system and we're taking you into really harrowing situations. There are things that I discovered in the research that I suppose just as a filmmaker would say, if you were making Shawshank Redemption, you ask yourself, what do you not show to leave to the imagination? And I think that it's even more intense in a virtual reality experience, where if you are going to do something like the Holocaust, or you were going to do something like the prison system, where these absolutely life-changing, harrowing, and terrible things happen on a daily basis, you ask yourself, how much does the audience need to see and experience, and how much can you leave to the imagination? I do think almost all the time in every single discussion I've had, there's this question of ethics around how much you show people and how much you don't, because it does affect you on a deeper psychological level than a 2D screen.
Christina?
Well, yeah, this is definitely something we're interested in. We're working with a small department at USC Neuroscience right now on a piece for stroke victims that you actually are controlling with their brain reader thing. So that's cool. And and part of the reason we're doing it is because I'm excited about starting to link real data about like when you experience certain VR experiences, which parts of your brain fire up and that kind of thing. So, but I was, when we were talking with somebody recently, I was saying, one of the more obvious use cases for VR for me is education, right? Like, it just seems like a no-brainer. You can take kids to places they wouldn't normally be able to go. You get, you can do data visualization in interesting ways, and I found out that actually there's not been some of the VR push for education that you would expect, because everyone's really nervous about this 13 or under thing with VR. So I don't know. I'd like to open that up as an ongoing discussion. I realize we're saying that maybe it's not good for kids under 13 to watch VR, but I think that maybe if we started to do it in limited ways, there could be an opportunity for real mind expansion and educational content. And somebody also mentioned will it make them more ADD? And I don't think we know the answer to that, but it also could make them less ADD, because you can, when you're in there, I don't know about you guys, but you're trapped in there, you're focused. So I'd like to, I don't have an answer, but I'm just throwing these things out. I think we definitely need to be exploring them more and getting real data for that.
Yeah, awesome. And from an this is completely different from an educational perspective. We were just talking about Nani de la Peña. I was with her last week in her office, and for those of you that have seen her piece on Syria, and this is something that we always talked about theoretically, but now it's happened. So there's go to Emblematic Group and look at her amazing piece on Syria. That street no longer exists. They mapped a place and created it in VR, and that street is gone. So from an educational perspective, in terms of talking about going out into the world and mapping places, that didn't exist or that haven't yet existed, that's obviously another really interesting application. And another thing that I thought about relative to your piece is there's another piece that she did called Kia, K-I-Y-A, that's also extremely moving. Anybody else on that sort of thing?
There's this, I don't know if this is invading your conversations as well, but there's this whole theory that we actually all are living inside a very advanced...
The Matrix, baby.
Right, and so it's one of those things where it's as we're getting, the truth is, as you've seen the evolution of VR, even in the last 3 years, 3 years ago that would have sounded it was it's the Matrix, it's crazy. It's a little bit, it's one of those things where when you say that you have a harder time separating out your memory from a VR experience, I think that's 100% real. And as headsets become lighter and they become more immersive, and we figure out sort of the resolution gets higher, it's going to be really difficult to be I actually didn't experience that. And I think
It's just a VR experience.
right. And I think, and I feel like that thing is, I think it's going to be the new version of ADD, right? We don't know what that thing is going to be, but there's going to be people who be oh, I had this whole life. And you're going to be no, that.
No, actually.
I think that's already happening now.
VR and ethics.
I remember going through a room scale experience. I don't know who's tried it, but Job Simulator. Mm-hmm. So it's you get to sit in your cubicle and do stuff. And I went home and I was telling my girlfriend Kim about it, and I said, oh, well, I grabbed a coffee cup and I put it into the coffee maker and I pressed the button and coffee came out. And then I took a creamer and I was pouring cream into the cup. And at that point I realized I was miming the real actions instead of the holding onto these plastic sticks and pulling triggers. And not only that, but as I was explaining it to her, my brain was filling in detail about the texture and the weight of a coffee mug and how it feels different. Yeah, and that wasn't real. It wasn't there. But my brain's just like, yeah, sure, I know what that's like. I'll just add that information in here to this memory that you had in this place.
Yeah.
But have you guys seen The Void? Have you guys tried The
Oh,
Void?
yeah.
Like that, that messes with your mind on like such a fundamental level. Like you're like, oh, I'm walking in a straight line, and no, you're not.
Yeah, I had this experience. I think I sent it to you when you were talking last night. There's a physics engine called Midas Touch Games. They're a pretty small company, and they basically model bipeds and quadrupeds. And using leap motion, you pet this dog. You can all go watch this video. But here's the thing, and I would not have believed it if it didn't happen to me twice. But you're petting this dog, and you're scratching his ear, and you're patting his back. You feel the fur. At least I did. It was the creepiest and most amazing thing of my life. My brain just assumed, oh, we're dropping stitches. We got to pick up the slack. It's obviously a real dog because we're going like this and he's rolling this way and we're going like this. And so my brain completely filled. That was crazy shit.
I want to actually just on that point and speaking to, because we're in a room pretty full of great content creators. It's just what Uncle Ben told Peter Parker. With great power comes great responsibility. We have to remember this.
That's awesome. Well said. All right, questions. There was what? Yeah, just stand up. Is that? Yeah, stand up, please.
So, talking about that's called phantom limb. So even if you're an amputee with legs, remember that you will have that phantom sensation, psychologically, neurologically. So this question about gravitating for senses and stuff. I did Samsung has gloves and stuff that you can actually pick up other. I don't know if you've done the Mayan treasure ruins room. It's basically you're in this room and there's these objects and they allow you to take it off, and really have the presence of gravitating to the physics of the actual coffee mug or handle, exact weight and everything to incorporate it with VR. So I'm also kind of wanting to know that in your future trends of your original content, do you think that you're going to embed more physical aspects and 3D stereoscopic audio into your theme, not just in the perspective of one, but many perspectives? Are you guys experimenting on things like that on a technical or fun way?
What was the question?
I totally know what she's saying. I mean, I think
kidding,
all
I'm
of that stuff's really, really exciting, and I think that what we're all struggling with right now in the VR industry, and you guys can echo me or debate me on this, but it's, we're still waiting for the consumer market, so it's a chicken or the egg scenario. In order to do that kind of stuff, you need a budget. You need a budget, and we can, and we are excited, I think, as a whole community to make some really badass virtual reality. But it's, I think it's going to be a little slow going while the consumer market is evolving, and
It's a little tentative at the moment,
Yeah.
but there's definitely a lot of people, a lot of little rogue companies doing a lot of creating on that level. And, I guess there is an ethical question in terms of how far into reality do we really go? But at the moment, I think to put our brakes on right now is premature.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still in the oven mitt, as I call it, the HTC mode of VR. Let's not get all carried away that we're going to be lost in a world that, there are a lot of hurdles to get over before we're not sure whether we're in reality or not reality.
I think Ted last night said we were like playing Pong, right?
Yes.
We're at the Pong stage. Yeah.
I call it the Miss Centipede now,
we're Centipede.
Miss Pac-Man. We're a little past Pong. Miss Pac-Man.
Awesome. That's a great question. Yeah, please stand up.
So there's some estimates coming out, and you recently talked about cost per minute, kind of openly estimates. Anybody care to start throwing out some budgets about what you think?
I think there are too many. There are too many variables.
Yeah.
Like from a 360 video, very low end, you can be talking $200,000 for a non-interactive experience. But if you're talking a fully CGI, interactive, multiple outcomes, I mean, the sky's the limit. Depending on
I think honestly, we say VR, and people talk about VR, but right, it's all the different forms of VR to AR to 360 video to 360 video with interactivity to 360 video with immersive, right? Like it just
6 degrees, 3 degrees, right.
I don't even think we have, like, if you talk about television, you have, you're like, oh, is it a drama? Is
Yeah.
it a comedy?
Yeah.
Is it a miniseries, right? Like, you have, like, your boxes you can fit in. We are so far from even knowing what the shapes that we're talking about are at this point.
I don't think there is a model yet.
I would agree with you 100%, just like Hollywood has big budgets, little budgets, micro budgets.
But you still have the term, though, there. You're like, you're making a movie,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's going to be exhibited in the theater, or you're making something that's going to be on television, and then you can say it's animated, it's live action.
It's finite. What we're doing has no finiteness to it yet.
That's right.
It's all make it up as you go a little bit.
Which is cool.
Which is great,
We got to
yeah.
make the rules right now.
Yep. Omnidirectional treadmills.
Nope.
No experience.
I know.
Wouldn't be opposed to it, though.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Bring it to the party, please.
Yeah, right.
Glasgow Park.
Totally. Anybody? Did you ever see The Walk? Have you seen The Walk VR? By any chance? Well, I'll go real quick. So in the Walk VR, it's based on Philippe Petit's walk between the two World Trade Centers, and it's Create Advertising, who are in Culver City. But you actually walk between the World Trade Centers, and you look down, and you feel, even though you're in a completely safe office building, that this thing is real, and they put you on a cut hose so you feel a wire, and I don't think they do this anymore, but they used to put a fan behind you, and what they say, which is totally believable because I've seen it, is that 1/3 of people, even though they know it's fake and intellectually they know they're in a conference room, can't take 4 steps out onto that. Were you one of them? 1 step. You could take 1 step, yeah. So that would seem to implicate that, that phobia, anybody,
Yeah,
right?
I think that VR is already being used by medical specialists to treat war veterans for PTSD, not by taking them into soothing environments, but actually recreating combat, and in some cases recreating the smells of what Iraq or another area where combat has happened may have happened, but what is different about the VR experience versus what they really experience is the outcome is different. So it's kind of helping to rewire how they might feel about what their memories are. I find that really fascinating.
And I know that there's stroke rehab companies that are dealing with similar things. Yeah, right there.
Unfortunately, there isn't yet. I know.
So far from.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
But even just to be clear, even within that, like, it's still hard to find things, right?
Yeah.
So like, Gear it used to be Milk VR, now it's Gear VR, and even anyway, it's
We're pretty bullish about web VR for the future. I think that VR that you can access right from the browser is really exciting, and it's already. I mean, we're publishing one this week, interactive 360 video in the browser. So yeah, I think that like we're talking about that more and more with clients because we're like, guys, like you don't have to use Facebook, you don't need to use YouTube if you want, unless you want to for hits and stuff like that. But yeah, soon you'll be able to explore the metaverse through your Chrome.
Done.
Awesome. Maybe 1 or 2 more. Was there? Yeah, Mark.
This is not really a question, but you hinted at it a few times. Just the idea of which senses are activated, and what I've found in the pieces that I've done, even one additional sense to well, you have sight and you have audio. As soon as you have directional audio, that raises the level enormously. But any one additional thing, like a fan blowing on you, or touching a hose on the ground, or you were talking about that pseudo-tactile thing, tremendously raises the realism factor that your brain is just convinced that you're in space. So I'm just curious whether you guys think about that.
We dream about it. We're definitely.
That's not a dream, actually.
I mean, that's, I think, something that you see more in installation pieces or activations. But I had a really interesting conversation with Curtis Hickman from The Void, because when I was watching the trailer, there's this point where you see one of the people in the headsets, and they brush away what is essentially just 3 strings hanging from the ceiling, and it cuts to the VR part, and it's a cobweb. And immediately I knew exactly what was going on there. Whoever brushes those 3 strings away, their arm is translating, or their brain is translating that sensation into, there's an entire cobweb here. And Chris was like, yeah, you should see people who have arachnophobia go through that. It's just insane. Just like little pieces like that, like even like we were talking about the fan for the walk, like it gives it's just another piece that your brain will then extrapolate more information from that's actually there.
Yeah, when we were doing The Martian, we got all the way down to Christmas time, and we had been talking to D-Box about the experience with the chair, and literally we were just sort of like, it's a Hail Mary. If they come through, great. If they don't, we'll see you at CES. And I'm gonna tell you, like, we had done that experience, and it was great. And if you get the chance to do it without the D-Box chair, it's great. But with the D-Box chair, it is light years.
It is
more immersive. It is just that simple sensation, like when you're being saved and the chair sort of tilts back like this, and you're like, you totally, I'm in,
And we're working on a Jack in the Box piece now, and they're doing bacon-smelling cardboards. So guys, smell-o-vision.
Time to get out.
You had another one that I may have. What? Yeah, please.
Super nice not to have to talk for an hour.
For once.
Yes, Tom?
I'll just say one thing that everybody in this room will relate to, because it's one of the original VR experiences. If you ever, as a kid, did the haunted house at your school carnival, and they put a blindfold on you, and someone said, touch your hand.
Yeah.
It's a brain.
Yeah.
Cauliflower. Would you like to feel some eyeballs and your peeled grapes?
Yeah.
That's an original VR experience, and all they did was take 1 sense away and plug in another one, and as a little kid, or even a teenager, you totally buy it. You put your hand on that, and someone tells you it's a brain, that's a brain. You didn't know it was a cauliflower, it's a brain. All this is just an expansion. Everything you guys have been talking about is that using and understanding what brain chemistry does is fascinating stuff.
I knew Ted should have been sitting here, not me.
No.
I think you guys did one, and I may have imagined this, but I remember being in the, and I was saying to Ted, I felt like, in a way, The Martian's 3 acts, like the middle act is when you're playing, but I remember feeling like, in retrospect, there was this sound, you had a really great audio cue, so I could be completely wrong, but I heard a storm, and the storm seemed to get louder, and it seemed to get louder, and I was sort of playing this game, and I'm like, what the hell's going on over there? And then I realized, then I reminded myself, you're not really anywhere, you're in a VR experience, but I still wanted to go out and see it, so I think you used a really astonishing audio cue to get me to leave one place and go out to another. Is that true?
And that was another great moment, because we were making that scene happen, and everybody was like, yeah, this is great. And then we realized, oh my God, there's no reason for you to be worried about this, so we created the storm. And that totally changed. Like now, like when I watch people do that, it's amazing how like they start out and then all of a sudden they become frantic because they can feel that presence of the storm. It's just a sound.
You just added peril.
Yeah, sound. It's sound.
Like, it's cool, it's fine, you play this thing and whatever, and you're moving on to the next section, but you didn't really care. And one of our creative meetings were like, what if there's a dust storm that's literally going to overtake you? And then suddenly it worked.
People sweat coming out of that. And they're like,
You know, it's the Wizard of Oz. It's the Wizard of Oz. That's what like it occurred to me later. It's a twister, and suddenly you hear that storm, and you realize, Dorothy, better get the hell out of there. All right, one more.
That guy in the back's been dead.
To that point, speaking about your brain filling in gaps, a lot of low poly, low resolution experiences can be very powerful, and sometimes I would even argue that it's almost better for that immersion, letting your brain do that amount of the work. So what is a priority for you guys this year, at this point, going into your next big experiences? Is it HDR? It can't possibly be going into 8K. Is it, what do you guys think you're working on prioritizing now for improvement? It's a big one at the end of the day.
I wish you were a stakeholder on all my projects because I have been trying, and I have come up with this sort of way of trying to sell that through, because a lot of the people that we work with, they strive for photorealism in VR, and we're just not there yet. We can get close, but sometimes I get very afraid when we show them very high quality CG graphics, and they're like, "Oh, that's way too cartoony," and I'm like, "What?" But there's this idea, and the way I've been trying to sell it through is that realism in virtual reality isn't photorealism. It's a balance between like visual fidelity or photorealism and interactivity, because you can have those low poly experiences, and as long as they're interactive, like Job Simulator, and I can pick things up and move them around, I'm sold. I'm sold on the experience because I have more, I guess, more senses. Even if I'm not getting the sense of touch, but I'm being able to. I have agency. Whereas in film or television, what you have is on a screen, and I'm separate from it. So if you want me to believe that that is real, you have to make it look and sound as real as possible, because those are the only things that you can use to convince me.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's true.
Awesome. Maybe one more. Yeah. Okay. I will. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Oh, Bill. Yeah. Will, is that Will Kendall?
A bunch of us here who have come up through studio-centric kind of auteur-led productions. One of the best things I heard in the last week, I include VR on a lot, which is great, is Jen said talking about their experience where there was not really an auteur-lead in the experience creation. It was a collaboration, and that was very raw and very interdisciplinary. My question is, in the future, how do we preserve that when the auteur is actually the experiencer and not us? How do we preserve that kind of collaborative environment so it doesn't get co-opted by auteurs, egos, etc.?
Oh, wow. Ted?
Maybe more women.
I know, exactly. Less big egos. I think we're in the infancy, and I think that all of us are in this together. I've been part of this community now for a couple of years, Ted more than I have, but I feel like everybody here has the same goal, which is that we're all trying to push that same boulder up the hill. And I feel like, this is not going to be a medium. We jokingly say the best VR directors are being born right now. I feel like there might be a few, traditional directors out there that can work in this medium, but I really don't think it's anybody in that genre of Spielberg or whatever is going to want to take a giant step backwards and learn this. So I'm hoping that the people that are coming up now are going to grow up in this process as well and not move into that hierarchical, system of the cone shape down. I think it's, hopefully we can keep this in a much more organic and communal space where we all are growing something together.
I think though that it doesn't need to be one or the other, and I don't think it will be, right? I think one of the greatest things I've seen in the VR has been the Vive, in the paint program in Vive, right?
Brush.
So it's amazing. It's awesome. like I could do that all day, and I mean that's just me playing with a program. At the same time, you watch some of these, you watch The Martian VR, that's pretty great, and that's pretty traditional style storytelling done in a VR experience. And it was probably run, I don't know, but was it run like a regular set?
No, I think that's I guess you were at the talk we had last week, me and Ted, and we were saying how refreshingly collaborative it felt. Although Rob was ultimately running the show, and he was disseminating the information that he wanted to have happen, and he would everybody else had input and ideas, and it was a very unique experience. I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm much older than everybody on this panel, and I'm going to say that was one of the best experiences of collaboration.
Yeah, weirdly, I actually just wrote a book on the early days of TV, and the third one is actually going to be on VR Air. And the second one's on the cable age, and the third one's going to be on online video and what we're living through now in 4 years. But I wouldn't normally say this, but I think that's exactly right. When you look at Lucy and Desi particularly, and Gleason, and those people who are not our age exactly, but were sort of people who made the jump, what they had to do was take the leap into more collaborative mediums. The sort of one voice thing when you're in a new medium doesn't really necessarily work. You kind of have to come up with this combine, and nobody really knows how it's going to work and whether this is a horrible idea or a brilliant idea. So I think the early days of TV and the early days of film, they definitely bear that out. There are people who made that mid-career shift into a new medium, and all bets were off, and that's probably where we are. Is there one more? Yeah, okay.
Where's the kid?
She asked if the child is okay and Gone.
It's a very weird answer. If you get to the end of Gone, it gets very weird, and there's all these Reddit forums on sort of what the end actually means. So I'd say in the macro sense, yes, she's okay.
Thank God, we can all sleep tonight.
You guys were extraordinary. This has been a long 2 weeks for, I think, most of us who have been at conferences for the last 2 weeks. You guys were amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I wonder who won the debate.
China.